Is a site you can't imagine. You can't until you see it.
Hey everyone, I'm Nick Bloomer from BloomerBioactive and BloomerBioactive.com, and the voice that you just heard a moment ago was Wally Kern of Supreme Gecko. I'm so glad that Wally and I finally had a chance to talk, and I really hope that you guys have as much fun listening to this podcast as I did making it. Enjoy.
Happy that it's not on my end, not from a blame issue, but it's more from I don't even know where to start looking for issues like this.
I can honestly tell you, it has probably been 3 years or 4 years of talking to people on the computer and having relationships with people on the computer and stuff, and it's never been the other person.
Well, it's sometimes been me with my live streams, because I have started live streams in the application that I use and talked for about a minute and a half and realized that I never actually started the live stream.
Oh, man.
I've also had a couple of issues with live streams where I started talking and get the can't hear you, unmute, where it's actually my microphone and not being set up correctly. So, again, I'm so glad it's not me. I just hate technical issues.
It's like I have a good understanding with it for the most part, even having used some of this higher tech digital stuff that comes with like the audio recording and like music recording software, and every 2 or 3 years there's new software that comes out that makes some things easier and some things 10 times more complicated than they were 20 years ago, and I am just always in between on everything. So I'm glad I was able to get a quick fix on it instead of it being just half hour of trying to figure out where it went wrong. So yeah.
It sounds great to me. I want to say something real quick.
Sure.
I feel that when I'm on live streams that I sometimes hesitate. I say a lot. I sometimes take breaks in my talking, kind of trying to think of things to say or think of the right thing to say. Listening to your podcast the other day, you have just, and I'm not just saying this, you have a very, very good voice for these podcasts. It's a pleasure to listen to. You're very informative, number one, but just, how you present yourself and your voice is just so perfect for podcasts.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm very surprised to hear that too. And I don't know, I guess I don't get a lot of feedback or a lot of criticism on a lot of the audio or voice work stuff that I do, because it's very detached. So it's like people that are in the reptile hobby, and they know me as somebody that can be informative and very helpful and has good prices and all that fun stuff, but I don't put out very much digital content with this particular project that I'm working on. And I think, like I said in that podcast that I put together, it's because I was doing it when I was 12 or 13 years old, playing games and doing the YouTube commentary gaming thing way before it was what it is today. Like, Twitch was not a thing when I was doing that. This live streaming and making money playing video games was starting. And over a 10-year period, that blew up into an entire industry in its own right, and I don't think anybody ever really saw it coming. I know my parents didn't see it coming, because I was trying to convince them to sign the paper at 15, and I understand why they were hesitant about it, because at that time it was absolutely too good to be true. But now it's every day, so it's like
it's crazy, because you just never, like you said, you never saw it coming. My son, who's now 30, was doing this in his easily early 20s, maybe his late teens, watching other people play games. And I would come downstairs, and he's on the main computer or main TV watching people play games. And I'd sit down for a couple of minutes, watch it, and go, sorry, Christopher, I don't get this whatsoever.
Yeah.
He goes, I want to do this someday, and I want to. I don't. Why would you want to watch somebody play games?
Yeah, for most people, they really do think, it's going to feel like you're waiting for that Player 2 controller. And then it's like, yeah, you're waiting for that Player 2 controller, but this guy is hilarious. And you're never going to have this guy in your house playing a video game right next to you, but now you can. You can watch how he, problem solves this particular level and what his comedic spin on it is. It's its own thing of entertainment, so it's crazy.
Exactly. And then you look at it, after the fact, 10 years later, and you go, how did this thing take off, and why wasn't I a part, or why didn't I encourage why didn't I encourage my son to be more proactive and get involved with this and see it take off?
Yeah.
That's the hard question.
I think it was just such a weird time where things, like so many things were developing into a stable place. Like Facebook was still trying to figure out what it looked like. Google just bought YouTube and was changing everything to make it look and feel like Google, you know? And I just think that most of the internet was in this massive shift. And now we've watched a lot of that stuff settle down, and I feel like we're watching more of the individuals just drive it home. You know, these smaller businesses and smaller people, even in our community, who are designing websites that are not easy, they're not cheap, they're making massive changes. The Morph Market thing is a great example of that.
Oh,
you
yes.
know, of just smaller individuals that are just growing and growing and growing, and being able to have more say and hearing more people that I think are sometimes forgotten about when we're talking about Walmart or Amazon or these major scale corporations. So it's just crazy.
I 100% agree. And, you know, fortunately I can go back 20 some years ago and see some of the developments and some of the progressions and how things have changed so much. And it seems to be exponential lately. The growth, the changes, you know, we used to go from, like you were saying, from a build a website, build a store, to now, you know, it's Morph Market and 5-second videos on TikTok.
Yeah, and I'm so happy that you mentioned the 5-second videos on TikTok, because that is something that bothers me. I'm a long form person, and it drives me crazy that I have to make this content work, and sometimes there's no information in it at all. It's strictly entertainment, and it's 8 seconds long. You know, it's so short, so fast, but if you cater to that, you can post a video before you go to bed, and by the time you're asleep, it has 5,000 views on Instagram Reels or TikTok or something. And I just had my first one with a Pictus Gecko baby that got 15,500 views in 24 hours or 36 hours, which is just mind-boggling.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
I mean, I wasn't thinking that it was going to be like that. It was just a hatchling that I moved over into a cup and decided to film that process, which took 8 seconds. It wasn't much. But
and the hard part then becomes, if you're a long form creator like I am, I enjoy doing videos. I enjoy doing longer videos. I try to keep it under 15 minutes. I try to keep it under 10 minutes. I think nobody wants to watch a 10-minute video on here's how you care for a Paradora picta, like you had mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
But
except people like me that, I mean, I really don't think I would have even understood how to keep those animals if I didn't watch not just one of them in its entirety, but all of the parts of your guide on caring for Paradora picta, because they do have some really specific things about them, most of it with the humidity and the substrate that I kind of missed. You know, it's like, even coming from somebody that keeps leopard geckos and crested geckos, the pictus are kind of a niche. Like, they're very specific, you know?
And absolutely, and like I said before, I completely enjoy doing it, and I'll continue to do it. And I think that I like doing it because it's like leftovers. You can, have the same meal over and over. Oh, I missed it. Wow, I watched this 2 times, but I missed that one part.
Yeah.
So you can refresh and 2 or 3 months later, I just. Beginning watching it, I just want to know how to care for them, and then 2 or 3 months later, now what do I do with these eggs? Let me go back to that long form and check it out and see. I know part of what he said, but I do the same. But the problem is now we have to cater to both audiences. We have to create the long form, and when you get 563 views on your long form and you get 15.5 thousand on your short form, it just kind of makes your mind go, what really should I be doing?
Yeah, what is the best use of my time, And especially for us as keepers too, where I think at least half of our time is probably spent taking care of the animals in our collections and that we choose to keep and work with. It is so hard to do the marketing work, to do the social media work, to have the one-on-one engagements, and then make sure everybody's fed at the same time. And
especially if you're a solopreneur.
Yeah.
If you're a one-man show, and I greatly appreciate my wife helping so much, but 99% of the burden, and I don't want to say burden, 99% of the resources devoted to this business is me. So I you have to make that very very firm decision. I'm going to spend this much time on social media, and I'm going to spend this much time with the animals, and so on and so forth.
And there is this part too where it's like once you start doing it, and you do have to start doing it, it settles in a way to where it's like, oh, this is the flow. Oh, this is what's working out. And you don't think about it too much anymore. You just kind of dive into it, and it takes you where it takes you. And that could be anything from, how I decide to make my digital flyers, what days and what times I decide to post them, how many I'm going to make this week. I mean, everybody truly has their own approach to it, and I don't think that there's one right way to do it. But being able to make it work with your time is hands down the most important thing. But if you're particularly OCD, I think you're doomed.
100%, because if you set that schedule in motion at the beginning of the day, and it's now 9 o'clock and I should be downstairs. I've just answered a bunch of messages, and I've taken care of the orders, verification, and marked them, and we'll ship the schedule. And then it's 9 o'clock. I should be downstairs. I should be feeding the animals. And then I get a message, hey, you're shipping today, but I gave you the wrong address.
Yeah.
Can you hold it here instead of here? Can you hold it at the post office instead of sending it to... Sure, let me go ahead and answer that. And then it becomes a 15 thread conversation back and forth, and now it's 9:30, and now, like you said, my OCD starts kicking in, and then it's like, I'm going to answer this just as short as I can, because I've got to get my stuff done, which is not fair to the customer or the person asking a care question. So you're right, you do have to be flexible in many different ways.
And I also want to thank you, too. Right before we started this call, you said, I'll be back in 15 minutes. I'm going to go grab some lunch. Thank you for the reminder for both of us to eat today over here. So even just mentioning that and having this conversation, all right, I really haven't done that. I've just been packing my orders that are going out this week. And even right after this call, I'm off to the post office. So everything is to a T trying to make things work. And even last week, we had to reschedule this call just because of my car stuff. So I had to make all that stuff, to shuffle it in and figure out how to make it work, and somehow it always works. So,
well, you've seen my videos, so you know that I never ever skip a meal. So
well, hey, I mean, it is such a physical job that I truly feel awful if I don't eat. I cannot move the tubs. I cannot do the water changes. I've got 9 fish tanks on top of the pod bins going right now, 3 of which are over 50 gallons, so not small tanks. I had a buddy that gave me a python hose, which is the best gift another person that's in the aquarium hobby could possibly give you, especially when you're doing bucket water changes in a carpet apartment.
Yes, absolutely.
So shout out to Dakota there. I am so grateful for that. Every single week I'm using it.
Nice. For fish, and we could have probably 20 of these 1 hour or however long you want to go conversations based on fish, based on orchids, based on baseball. It feels sometimes like my hobbies are very eclectic, where they're just all over the place. I was in fish. I kept fish for a long time, president of the Milwaukee Aquarium Society National Convention.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. I didn't know that at all. I knew that you had kept, various cichlids and stuff, and I've heard a lot about, some of the Kentucky fish groups and the Ohio fish clubs and stuff, and even in Indiana, we have the Circle City Aquarium Club, but I have not even heard of the Wisconsin Aquarium Society, so I'm baffled that you were the president of it.
This is like 120 years ago, so you probably didn't hear about it.
So in the heyday of fish keeping, because it's on the rise again now, but
back in 1908, I was so my wife and I were highly involved with the Milwaukee Aquarium Society. We had just a bunch of fun, but we got to a point before the internet where it just became too big.
Yeah.
And I had to make that decision between, and we had our third son, and he wasn't doing too well. Lots of time in the hospital early on, so I had to make that decision between family and work, and fish and work paid the bills. And I loved my job, absolutely loved it. Mm-hmm. And obviously I couldn't do anything about family. Loved my family, so fish was the one thing that kind of slid by the side. And I sold all of my. I think I was at 125 aquariums. I sold them all and all the fish and the pump and everything in one weekend. One Saturday, people from Chicago and all over the place came and bought everything. I missed those days. I had a lot of fun. I gained a lot of experience. So then I got into other stuff, and then finally Reptiles about 20 years ago. And the last couple of years I missed fish so much that I built a little rack, and it holds 18 tanks, 10s and 5s.
Nice.
And that's all that I can extend to. That's my limit right there, on purpose, so that I don't have another fish room and just get so involved with that, because of the reptiles are so ingrained right now in what we do.
Yep, and I think that there's something too about the reptiles, that they're very accessible, and I don't think that has anything at all to do with the price. I don't think that has anything to do with the care. I think it has something to do with them simply being terrestrial. Like, we are, as people, are terrestrial, and these other animals are also terrestrial. And the fish, to some people, or some types of people, I guess they just seem alien. Like, they don't know what to do with them. They don't know how to think about it. They don't know what cycling a tank is, because, let's be real, we don't really have to do that with some of these terrestrial animals. Like, yes. It's a different beast, and it comes with a different price too, in some of the equipment and the gear and the long-term planning. To where even with working with angelfish, most of my bigger tanks that I keep, those 3, are entirely because I had 2 groups of angelfish pair off, and that's a lot of babies when you have 2 pairs of angelfish just cranking them out simultaneously. And I've been able to move most of those fish and get them out to local stores and rehome some of them individually. But I mean, that was my lesson for me, to where it's like, oh, I'm not sure this is worth it. It's so much work, it's so much time, and I love the fish probably more than anything else that I'm keeping. But I'm not sure I would breed angelfish again like that, unless it was just to go to a local store, and we're talking store credit too, not even cash. So working as a reptile person, there's a lot I can do with that on a trade. So it's not a bad deal, especially if I have other projects that I want to get going and all that. But right now, I think for me, my absolute most favorite fish that I've been keeping are my discus, and I have 4 of them right now, which I've had them for 2 years, I think, about 2 years, and they were 2.5, 3 inches when I first got them in, and
nice.
And so they're just about of age and of size to hopefully start breeding. But again, after the angelfish experience, I'm a little hesitant to try and push forward on that, just because of the space and the amount of effort it would take. But discus are a completely different story. But
discus are a completely different story. Completely. So discus I'm going to tell us a real quick story. I don't know if you want to hear this or not, but
of course I want to hear
kind of venture into it because you brought up discus. When I was keeping fish, I liked small fish. I like apistogrammas and killifish and little, wild-caught betas or bettas. I didn't have very many large fish. I had some Tropheus, from Lake Tanganyika.
Yeah.
But I did, at one point, purchase 10 discus from Jack Watley. And grew them up, had them in all of them in a 125. And I had a wet-dry filter before anybody was doing wet-dry filters. This is, again, 100 and some years ago. But
right.
Water was crystal clear, and I waited. It was like 2 years. I was like, these discus aren't going to spawn. I don't know what I'm doing. I go in, I feed them, and maybe I'll just get rid of the discus because I like little fish. I can have more little fish and more, see more activity than having this one big tank with these discus that aren't doing. Well, it came down one day, and it was the 125 ran off of both the wet dry, but also an under gravel filter. Way back in the day, under gravel filters were real popular, but it had the 6 lift tubes, I think 6 lift tubes, and sure enough, on 4 of the lift tubes, I had a female discus guarding eggs on 4 lift tubes. So whatever happened, the barometer changes, or maybe I had done a water change, whatever. 4 pairs went just like that one day. So I moved the pairs into the fish room, because the 125 was outside the fish room. And those pairs, I didn't do anything with water quality. Out of Milwaukee, our water was a little bit hard, so I wasn't concerned about getting 100 babies.
Right.
But for about a year, I was getting off of those 4 pair probably about 15 to 20 babies each, and had a long waiting list waiting for, babies. So those 4 pair ran the fish room easily, every single month with selling the babies.
Oh, that's
But I'll
crazy.
tell you what, just like you said, a discus is a completely different animal than an angelfish. Angelfish are cool, and it's cool to see them laying eggs. It's cool to see mom and dad watching them and everything. But to see the cloud of baby discus and one parent, shake and slide out, and the other parent to slide into that cloud, and the cloud separate and then come back in together with the other adult, and then start feeding on the slime on the adult's body. It is a sight you can't imagine. You can't until you see it.
Every time I've seen a video of it, and this is going back to the fish are very alien thing that I was saying before, it makes me think of like a mothership, and then all of the little, it's super sci-fi looking. It's like, I don't understand how there's this thing that is 1,000,000 times bigger than this little speck that is getting everything that it needs to sustain its entire life and growth from just a little bit of this membrane. It is the weirdest thing that I've ever had to think about. And then you add on like how they use their scales to do the flash and shimmer, and they just seem to communicate in a way that's just unreal. It is unlike any other animal I've ever seen. And I know that other fish do the shimmers, especially in the cichlid family, like some of the geophagus, and like I have a Braziliensis, and he's gorgeous, has that same sort of blue shimmer, but he does not use it. It doesn't feel like there's any intention with it. Meanwhile, if I'm coming in the room, they're going to flash like crazy because they want me to feed them.
It's a fascinating world, again, from anything like anywhere from the pistogrammas, who also the females, and the males completely change color sometimes. A female can be a little yellow thing with a couple of little, vertical stripes and kind of cute and everything, but then she has a batch of babies and she becomes, Godzilla, and she changes to this golden color, and the black bars become black spots that are just, like ink spots on her body, and she becomes, listen, this is my house, and you don't come next to my babies. You stay away from my babies, and we'll defend anything, any size, away from her babies. So there's so many aspects of keeping fish that are so different. But you're right. It's that, we did a reptile show yesterday, and one of the thrills of doing a reptile show for me is, and it'll never be money, and it'll never be how many did we sell and how much did we sell and what do we need to do to increase the business. It'll always be talking to people, helping people out. Hey, I bought a Leachianus, and I don't do Leachianus, but somebody walking up to say, oh, I bought a Leachianus, how do I do this, how do I do, and me helping them explain, how to care for their animals better, or what to change in their enclosure. But most importantly is seeing that family that walks up to the table and they're kind of inquisitive, and the kids are like, oh, these are geckos, they're so cool, can I touch one? Absolutely. And then have the parents, when I bring out the crested gecko, take that step back away from the table. It's like, oh, this is game on. I've got to get mom or dad to at least touch this crested gecko. And 99.99% out of 100, when they first touch the gecko, the face lights up and it's like, oh, this isn't really that bad. It's not creepy. It's not slimy. It's not icky. This is actually pretty cool. And, the kids are way past that point. They're like, I don't care. I don't have any preconceived notions of what this thing is. And oh my gosh, it could bite me. Parents are all, oh, I don't know about, and they touch it for the first time, and it's like a whole earth-changing kind of event for them. It's so cool to see. And that's why we'll always be doing reptile shows.
That's absolutely awesome. It's like I haven't had too many experiences like that, just because I've done so many shows where I just had deadly containers of isopods, and people don't generally want to hold them. Sometimes it happens, there's a few, but they're already into isopods at that point, and they just want to see them, up close and personal. But I did do one show where I had a Cresty, and I was hit with that. It's like over and over and over again. It's like, oh, can I hold it? Can I hold it? It's like, it's the only one that I brought, and I don't want to stress this one out, just letting it go from person to person to person. But even myself, being with other vendors where I've had the luxury of meeting a Cresty Gecko that was in another vendor's collection that was 15 plus years old, You get to see this awesome, one-of-a-kind gecko that's been around forever and produced who knows how many babies, right? It's just there hanging out, and it's just like you don't see too many of these older animals that are really somebody's personal pet. You know, that you see a lot of the babies that they're 1 to 3 years old, or maybe even a little less. You know, I think 3 months is generally where we're trying to keep things at bare minimum, but 10, 15, 20-year-old animals are hard to come by, I guess, you know, at least on the trade end. So even just to be able to see them and interact with them a little bit, it's very nice and it's very refreshing. So I guess that when you meet these older animals, that's as close as I get to a brand new person in the hobby that is seeing something for the first time, and they are a little either overwhelmed or underwhelmed. They don't know what to think about, you know, the gecko, but they're on the fence about it. So they're not running for the hills yet. And that is the perfect opportunity to get in there and make that first experience, because if they never have one and they're that close, they're going to avoid it. And that's not fair to them, because they don't know what they're missing. And there's just so many cool animals out there that absolutely need homes, and many of them are not as difficult as people think they are. So there's a lot of this hesitance just to try, you know? Yes.
And I think a lot of that is because there's some preconceived notions, and I'm not sure where they're coming from online, pet stores, where they go in and say, what kind of reptile should I want to get a reptile, what kind should I get? And then they're led over to, you know, leopard gecko, and you have to feed it insects, and you have to have heat for it to keep it at, 85, 90 degrees. Well, what else do you have? Well, we have bearded dragons. So you have to feed in, some insects, you have to feed in greens, and you have to keep it, this UVB light, and you have to do a heat lamp, and people are like, oh my gosh, I'm going to buy this $25 or $30 animal, and then I have to spend $300 on the enclosure and all the supplies. I don't know if that's, the right direction for me and my family. Mm-hmm. Then they come to a show and they see a crested gecko, and it's like, it doesn't need it's better if it has live food, but the Pangea crested gecko diet is perfect. No special lighting, no special heat, a nice enclosure, and that's it. That's all you need.
I would love to be able to ask you this too. Do you have a preference of like Rapashi for crested gecko food, or do you prefer the Pangea supplements, or do your cresties have a preference, regardless of what you think?
They don't get a choice anymore. This is a delicate subject for me, because I used to be a big time distributor of Rapashi.
Sure.
And unfortunately, I think that Alan changed the formula a couple of times, and it didn't. And this is years ago, and I know it's a comparable formula now, but the formula was changed, and it caused some issues with people's collections, and I lost a number of animals, again, years ago. Mm-hmm. But if you do the analysis, I feel that the Pangea is a better product, number one, but I don't think Rapashi is terribly too far behind.
Right.
I just prefer Pangea.
Okay, because I'm at a point where it's like I had a collection of Rapashi stuff, and I've used majority of it, if not all of it, and I'm kind of in this point where, okay, I've got a few geckos that aren't going hungry yet, but I can either buy more Rapashi or I can buy more Pangea, and I haven't even tried the Pangea stuff yet. So it's something to where they're a physically close company, being right there in Michigan, and I've seen their booths at expos, and I've loved every interaction I've had with them, and I've ordered from them a couple of times, and I think they're fantastic. Like, they are quick, prompt, their prices are great. So my overall experience with Pangea Reptile is phenomenal, but I'm still a little hesitant on making that jump from another food that I'm going to give my animal. So, I'm just... I don't... Go ahead.
There's a lot of factors there, and you just mentioned the location. It's close to home and all. I'll say another thing about Pangea. They've ended the show that I was at this weekend, yesterday. Gosh, time flies. Yesterday they were at the show, the Sewerfest show, and I was busy behind the table the whole day. The main person that did the show yesterday took the time to walk all the way around the room and find me and come over and say hi, and we talked for a couple of minutes. He realized that we were kind of swamped, and he took the time to come over and say, how are you doing, Wally? How are things going? And that, little things like that leave a big impression on me. Mm-hmm. And I just feel that puts, if nothing else, that puts Pangea a little bit of a step ahead. And I'll give my business to Pangea every day for something like that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to have any one-on-one conversations with them myself yet, and even with doing local expos, I generally am more, staying around the Midwest, but I don't go north very often, like up towards Wisconsin, up towards Michigan. I kind of don't really go north out of Indiana. Like I'll go over to Ohio, or I'll go over to Cincinnati, or maybe down south a little bit, Kentucky or southern Indiana. But I'm very happy to hear from other people when they have these in-person interactions with these businesses, because I see the corporation front more than I see the people that are working on the back end. So when I hear that, they're nice people and that they're doing great things and they have this sort of mentality, I love it. I absolutely love it. I have met some of the other bigger players in the hobby. Like I've met Josh from Josh's Frogs in person and had great conversations with him. I think he's a great dude, and
yes.
I know
yes.
that. When sometimes scaling up these businesses are hard, and we have to make choices that normal people generally don't have to make. And like you said before, we have families, we have things that happen, we have goals and lives that we want to live too. And that doesn't mean that we have to make unethical choices or choices that hurt animals or don't do the right thing in the long run. But that doesn't mean that the choices are easy either.
They're not, and sometimes at best, better choice is to take a step back and reevaluate and determine: do I need help? Do I need somebody to come in here and do this? Do I need to hire an agency to do all of my social media? Do I need to hire somebody to do the editing of my videos? I find sometimes that I'm working too much in the business, and I need to take that step back and work on the business more.
And
that's hard.
If you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for hanging around. I really do hope that you enjoyed this conversation between me and Wally. And if you have anything that you'd like to share that you learned from this video, or anything that you'd like to know more about, please drop a comment below or reach out on our social media at BloomerBioactive everywhere. You can also visit our website for microfauna, springtails, isopods, leaf litter, substrate, and more at bloomerbioactive.com, and subscribe to our email list to stay up to date on deals and more. And don't forget to say hey to Wally over on Supreme Gecko on its website, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. I really couldn't be more grateful to have had Wally on this podcast, so thanks again, Wally. And again, please go visit Supreme Gecko for all of your gecko-related needs.